Good evening and welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner with Derek Piper live at Welsh Shrine. And hey, we got a special guest. Isaac Trotter is live at Welsh Shrine as well. So we got the trio here back at Illini Inquirer in the podcast. But we have to talk about a tough loss, boys. 70-66. Illinois loses at Northwestern. Second straight year in overtime. They blow a 10-point lead with 10 minutes left. Nick Martinelli was terrible in the first half, just 4 points, had 23 points after halftime. Booty balled Illinois to death there late. Kasper Siakishonis, his heroics were awesome, but not enough for Illinois, which shot terribly, especially from three in this game. So, Derek, take me in. You were there. What was it like watching this unfold?
It stung for Illinois fans, no doubt. I mean, you're up 10 in the middle of the second half, and Northwestern is able to – it seemed like a real pivotal point where they're on the ropes and maybe you can put them away. And it's a two-man show for them offensively. They don't have enough of a supporting cast to really pose much of a threat, especially when Ty Berry's not making threes. So that felt like, especially with them really going anti-analytics and taking a lot of non-rim twos, like can they make enough of those if Illinois makes one more surge offensively to kind of drive that stake in the heart, but they couldn't do it. 8-0 run for Northwestern. It's a game. And, I give credit to Northwestern. Barnheiser and Martinelli are tough as hell. They're really tough players. They're physical, and they were darn determined to attack, especially first few possessions out of halftime. It's Martinelli ISO on Benham Reckhouse, and he had a tough night. Not only, really both ends. You go 1 for 9 from three, and Brad says he's okay with the shots that he took, and I understand that. Illini fans not okay that kept being the matchup that he saw defensively. So it felt like a game, obviously, that shouldn't have gotten to overtime. I was curious to see. It's a team that's never been in this position before as a unit. I know they had to put away Arkansas, but they had that 9-point cushion at the least throughout that. Alabama, they weren't within a possession or two. So this was a first reference point of that. Some things to nitpick for sure. We can dive all into it. I thought on the last possession before overtime, KJ takes that step back three, and his shot making was unreal down the stretch. But Tommy has Jalen Leach 1-on-1 in the post, 6'4" guard on him. I thought there were times where they didn't see that matchup, didn't get to it. So Tommy said he felt like Northwestern was a team that was tougher, that they wanted it more down the stretch, and Illinois is going to have to learn from these moments for sure.
Yeah, Isaac, it felt like the team that was tougher, that was more physical, that was more veteran, stood out in the second half and overtime when it got to crunch time, which Big Ten games will, and we know Big Ten games on the road are very, very difficult. Illinois' veterans struggled. Benham Rickhouse, Kylan Boswell, barely saw Trey White tonight, right? The freshmen tried, but they go through their ups and downs. What stood out to you in this game, which is a matchup of kind of mirror opposites stylistically?
Yeah, first thing I think that I looked at is Nick Martinelli's, they call it the flipper, that shot. It's one of the most efficient shots in basketball. So I get that Illinois is fine with that shot and it's this is a non-rim two, but not all non-rim twos are created equally. And I thought Martinelli, he has been the best, this is his shot. That little floater thing, that is the best shot for him. He's shooting 66% on them this year. It's been unbelievable all year long. So I think some of the easy switches that they gave up down the stretch was something I think the staff would probably want back. There were opportunities where I think they weren't trying to switch and it just kind of happened because they weren't quite tough enough to keep those isolation matchups. That's something that I think you have to get cleaned up moving forward. And then offensively, the other aspect of this, Illinois last year was one of the best transition offenses in the country. They scored 2 points in transition. And part of me wonders if that's a little bit of hey, we're better when we slow it down, when KJ can process things a little bit and see the floor, get to his spots. But those easy buckets in transition that really fueled them the last few years were non-existent tonight. And I felt like they just needed a couple of those, and they would have had some separation and probably would have gotten down here with a roadkill.
Yeah, fast break point stood out to me. 11 free throw attempts, Isaac. I know it was a whistle that just didn't happen much tonight. It was a very physical game. They let them play, but I thought for the most part it was both sides, but you just didn't get to the free throw line all that much. Derek, you and I were talking before this. Listen, Brad Underwood's a phenomenal coach, but this felt like a game where Chris Collins got the best of him. That doesn't happen all that much, but I didn't understand. Benham Rickhouse just keep going to him. 39 minutes tonight 1 for 9 shooting. I know you trust him as a shooter. It wasn't his night there. But for me, it was more about defensively. And the fact that Merez Johnson gave you a spark, scoring 6 points during that 9-0 run, that helps them get a 10-point lead. I'm just surprised that he didn't get back in the game at some point. And like Isaac's talking about, there just it never seemed like there was an adjustment to, booty ball. Like, where's a trap? Where's something that can slow them down?
No doubt about it. I know Brad was asked about Ben playing that many minutes after the game and said that we really wanted his shot making and floor spacing, and it did open some things up for KJ. It's different when you got Merez out there, certainly hovering around the paint. But, yeah, I mean, those two, Tommy and Merez, did operate well together. Tommy had that beautiful wraparound pass ultimately for the and one for Merez. Brad did then harp on, we didn't get enough offensive rebounds. Well, Merez might have the highest rebounding rate of anybody in the Big Ten if you look at KenPom. So that's something that he definitely could have helped out. But, yeah, defense, no doubt, I think was the biggest bone to pick. It was not a change in scheme or just some kind of wrinkle out there where you're not guarding the guy in the corner ultimately, and you're dorking him. There were a couple guys that Illinois was willing to just give 3-point looks, but you're kind of playing in no man's land where it felt like whoever was on, forgive me for not knowing the guy's name, but what is it? Justin Mullins, who hadn't hit a 3 coming into this game. And you're kind of just hovering in that painted area where you're kind of in no man's land. You're not going to trap, but you're not covering him on the 3 either. So I felt like he could have maybe been all the way aggressive of let's just get it out of Martinelli's hands. Because again, I mean, it's 2 guys for them that they're featuring offensively, and Illinois could have. It was hard to imagine Northwestern beating Illinois if they held down even one of Barnhizer and Martinelli, especially in the clutch. They couldn't do it enough, especially Martinelli. And I will say, and we mentioned it before the pod started, like I think it says something about Illinois' confidence in Trey White defensively that he never saw that matchup. He was, I think, on Ty Berry early while Kylan took the Barnhizer, but I think that says something. And but they didn't pull that ripcord and do something different enough. I know that Will Riley's slender, and maybe you don't want that as far as that goes, but Ben got cooked, and it was clear that Collins was going at that. Couldn't have that matchup enough in his mind for sure.
Yeah, Isaac, what stuck out to you about how Northwestern attacked Illinois both offensively and defensively, because they really knocked Illinois' offense off their game too?
Yeah, Illinois offensively, I thought they didn't. The driving lanes weren't there. I thought Northwestern did a really good job of zoning things up at times and playing the gaps. And I didn't see a lot of those straight line drives. Illinois didn't get them in rotation very often, and when they did, I felt like they missed some opportunities, especially one in the second half that I really thought kind of changed the game. Illinois had a couple wide open corner looks where they're up by 10 to maybe have like the killer blow. Those don't drop, and then Will attacks that long closeout, and instead of going up to try to dunk it or maybe draw a foul, he tries to go for a reverse. That doesn't happen. It's just like some of those little plays. And I think in a game like this, when it's a little bit lower tempo, this isn't in Alabama where you're getting up and at it. Every possession matters even more. And those little mistakes are magnified. And I thought, especially tonight was a sign that like, hey, Will's going to have some of these growing pains, because you saw that little flurry of those 8 points in a row in the first half. But he didn't help you a lot in the second half. And I think that's part of the maturation process where you do have freshmen. And I think Illinois' freshmen played like it, or Will played like it, not KJ, in the second half.
Yeah. What'd you think of KJ? I loved his aggressiveness to the rim. He just couldn't finish. A lot of those. You talk about Will unable to finish, and that's kind of where you miss the Domask or the Shannon. I mean, Jonas is doing most of it from beyond the 3-point line, but those easy points, right? Those free throws and those layups, Illinois just not getting. Even Tomislav, like Matthew Nicholson bullied him at times when he tried to post up. He's not really a post-up guy right now.
And Kylan missed a really good layup attempt late in the game too. You had multiple really good looks there too, where you weren't able to convert. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like those, it's like the margins in these games are so thin, and it's a missed layup and it's a missed free throw, and it's not attacking the rim with enough vengeance. Like all of those things matter. And I think you saw it too on the other end, where I thought Northwestern did a much better job of trying to get the ball to the rim in the second half. And Illinois, I thought their shot quality in the second half, Brad said he thought it was fine. I agree with that for the most part, but Illinois' shots were tough. Northwestern's had a lot more looks at the rim in the second half. They made just one layup in the first 1950 of regulation. In the second half and overtime, they made 7 layups. That's the difference, I think, in the game.
Yeah, the points in the paint at one point was like 14-4 in Illinois' favor. It ended up 32-30 in Northwestern's favor for this. Derek, I knew you felt like coming into this game, this is going to be an up and down team. Like we're going to ride the roller coaster. Is that what this is? We're just going to ride the roller coaster with this team?
I think so. I've tried to emphasize that. I've even in the back of my mind wondered if maybe I'd be wrong, if they would be just talented enough to ascend faster and more steady than I would have thought going in. But you can't replicate these type of moments. You can't replicate the fact you've never been in a tight game in the closing minutes, throw in on the road, even though I know, it's 65, 70% Illini fans in here, but it is different ultimately than playing in your home venue. So I've just lived by the statement of don't get too comfortable with this team. I think that still applies. And that doesn't mean that they can't, obviously return home and battle a Wisconsin team, but really could their high point be beating Tennessee at home? Yeah, it still could ultimately. But I do think, especially in a physical game, Tennessee's physical to the max. They're rebounding to the max. They're going to bully you to the max. That's something that you're going to have to adjust to and know that they're coming at some of your weak spots defensively too. But again, I have leaned on the process of it, and I think this is part of it. I think they're going to be able to watch it back and understand both things defensively and offensively in late game that they can do differently. And I just think it was part of one of those things that they got to learn from. Ultimately, they should have been able to close this though, because Tommy said it flat out. We're a better team than them, but we let them back in, and then they were able to pull it out.
Isaac, I think this was your first time seeing Kasper Sakshonis in person. This is the positive of this. We'll talk about maybe even Merez and Tommy here, but like this kid's a killer. He did everything he could to try and will his team to victory, and those are NBA shots. Like, what did you think of Kasper's?
Yeah, I was blown away. His ability to get to the spots that he wants for those threes is just nuts. The off the dribble shooting is something that I think translate at every single level and is really a get out of jail free card that Illinois has that not many other teams do. I think kind of when I think about basketball, I think like the point guard play and the center play. Those are the two most important positions in basketball. I think Illinois has those two covered with what Kasperis did tonight, 20 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists. Tommy, 15 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. You throw in Merez in there. You got 21 points and 17 rebounds and 5 assists from your bigs tonight. Like that should be good enough to win games. It really, for me, I think we've said it from the beginning, and it's going to be like this all year. I think the point guard play and the center play will be fine. It will be the wings that determine the ceiling of this group.
Yeah, and Derek, what are they going to get from Trey White moving forward? Because right now, like they aren't getting what I think they had hoped, what they had talked about. And then Will is going to go through his ups and downs, right? He's slender, 18-year-old, but you saw in the first half, he was a huge offensive jolt. So I think we understand that. But, Kylan, I thought started the game well, but then defensively he's good, but offensively they need a little bit more. What do you make of that? What do you think they're going to get?
It's a great question. Obviously a guy that's still trying to figure it out. He's somebody that could take a good amount of shots last year, and you're just not running a lot of actions with the end goal being to get Trey White a jumper or a driving lane. So I think that he should probably focus, and I think they're trying to really instill this in him, is being an animal on the offensive glass. This is a team that takes a lot of threes. You're going to have opportunities to crash, get long rebounds and maybe come off a baseline. That's another thing. Cutting, I think, too, is something that they're still getting chemistry on. And while a lot of the initial action is the ball screen and pick and pop, when teams send a lot of attention to that, and you saw them late in the game rotating up to Tommy because they send 2 to the ball and then 1 up to Tommy. You're playing like a 3-on-2 game with everybody else, and that should leave some cuts to the rim, and that should be something that Trey can do and be effective in. So he's got to find his spots there. We saw Quincy ultimately develop that last year as a cutter from the perimeter. And then, offensively, offensive rebound wise, it's got to be a big asset for him too. Defensively, we can keep talking about measurables and keep talking about he should be maybe a plus defender, but it's got to be every night. It's got to be something that really is a value to him, and he's putting a lot of energy in. And up to this point, we just haven't seen it consistently enough. So, Will with the shot making, you want him out there. Ben, obviously, that's what Brad said was the reason they kept him out there too. And he's got to I think he's got to do some of the Ty Rodgers type things to really. And I'm not saying that you're necessarily missing that, but that is a similar path to what can be complementary to the other things that Illinois does well.
Isaac, I want to ask you about the two opponents coming up. But Derek, I want to ask Merez Johnson, 6 points, 5 rebounds. Tomislav, 15 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. The behind the back pass was really sweet. But I mean, this is between Kaspers, Tomislav, and Merez. I mean, what a freshman class. I know Tomislav isn't technically a freshman now, but those guys have been the most consistent, it feels like.
No doubt, yeah. I mean, Orlando Antigua stand up and take a bow. I mean, I tweeted that. Tomislav Ivica is one of the best bigs in the Big Ten. I want to get Isaac's thought. I was trying to do this exercise today. Where does he rank in the Big Ten bigs power rankings? Now, there's a lot of good options. Obviously, Trey Kaufman-Renz had a great start, and Dawson Garcia is putting up really good numbers, and you can go on down. But I've said, and I've kind of just soft launching it out there, probably top 5 big out there right now in the Big Ten with everything that he provides. With you throw, not many guys, even for their production, can step out and shoot that three and open things up for other guys too. So he's been so pivotal. The consistency has been good. And I think just continuing to play, through some physicality is going to be important. But KJ obviously goes without saying, and Will's going to have his nights too. I know the last two haven't really been that, but yeah, those guys we've been over this before. We talked about it after Bama. Sometimes it's almost feel like when there's more to be desired, it's more of like the vets that you want more of. And I do feel like Kylan's really stepped up. Credit to him, but yeah, Trey White's in that, and tonight obviously Ben.
Tommy, 12 rebounds. He's been a better defensive rebounder than I thought, but where would you put him, Isaac, in the early going in Big Ten big men?
Yeah, I've been jotting this down as well. I think for me, the top 5 in some order is Trey Kaufman-Renz, Derek Queen, Danny Wolf, Tomislav Ivica, and Nate Biddle. I think those 5 have been phenomenal. I think my one big takeaway from this is there's so many great bigs in this league because Owen Freeman, I didn't mention him. Juju Reese has been awesome at Maryland. Vlad Goldeneye is still a big fan of his. And Tyler Bilodeau, Balo, Renew. Like, you go down it and you're like, did Washington pay $2 million for the 10th best big man in the Big Ten? Like, right. That's like where it is. But I think pound per pound, not to make this all about dollars and cents, but like what you've gotten, your ROI on the Tommy Ivica edition might make that even more when you factor in the cap room that you were able to also clear up for other editions. So I know it's a loss, but like you have to feel good about the process there with your roster building. Because what he does, I wrote it in my notes kind of during the game, like what Illinois can do offensively. They have like a way more options that so many different buttons they can press compared to Northwestern. The problem moving forward is can Illinois' defense force some of these teams to not go to their number one thing? It's like, how did Northwestern win tonight? It's a lot of the Nick Martinelli flippers. How does Alabama win? It's transition and running. It's how does, Arkansas be good offensively? It's transition. How does Ole Miss get working? It's 5s that can shoot. Can you take one of those things away, those things that they're really good at away? So far against Illinois' best 4 teams, even though they beat Arkansas, I don't know if you can say that.
All right, so let's look ahead to the next week where you get 2 great opportunities, quad 1 opportunities at home here, Isaac. You've seen these teams a little bit more than I have. John Tonje has turned into a superstar here at Wisconsin. They're number 11 team. They just lost Michigan in the Big Ten opener. And then you got Tennessee, one of the best teams in the country. So Tuesday against Wisconsin, Tennessee over the weekend. What do you make of those opportunities for them?
It's big time wars. And again, I think the recipe that you saw tonight from Northwestern will really come into play against Wisconsin because Wisconsin, again, is really posting teams up at a very, very high level. Tonje is kind of a big guard, kind of going to do some of the Damask stuff as well. But I think John Blackwell is honestly their best player. That's a little bit of a hot take, but he's been unbelievable defensively. And you go down through the list of the lead guards that they've played. Every lead guard is having one of their worst performances of the season against Wisconsin because of Blackwell's defense. He's going to be unbelievable and unbelievably impactful on Kasparis Yakashonis. And how do you avoid those matchups? How do you attack that? That's going to be huge. And then you turn around on Tennessee And you go from John Blackwell, one of the defenders you love, to Jemai Mashak, who might be the best defender in college basketball as well. Him and Zakai Ziegler at the point of attack are elite. Felix Okpara, familiar name at the back end. I think Tennessee has 3 ridiculously good defensive players, and Chaz Lanier has been a complete stud for them as just a complete assassin. He's taken his game to new heights after joining that group. So huge week. But I do think that the Northwestern game plan tonight, what you saw tonight from Northwestern, is what you'll see with Wisconsin, except you're at home. And what do we know in Big Ten play? You have to win at home.
Wisconsin, do they feel pretty good about the AJ Storr money getting freed up?
I think they're happy with how it's turned out.
I mean,
sure.
I would not have thought that when I watched him in March in Minneapolis. He was ridiculous.
No, I think that has a little bit of everything. But I think the other thing, too, with Wisconsin, their internal development's been really good. Kamari McGee, like Green Bay transfer, has turned into a really good player for them. You know, Max Klesmet is still somebody you have to respect. Stephen Krause, someone you have to respect. But they've gotten better in minutes out of Nolan Winter than I think a lot of people thought. So those in the margins is how Wisconsin has done it. Like right now, they're going to probably be a top 10 team in the country in the AP poll. The AP poll is trash. Like they're not a top 10 team in the country. But they're a lot better than what I initially thought because these pieces seem to fit together pretty well for the most part.
Derek, what do you think of this week ahead?
It's a huge opportunity for sure, and you get them at home. I think there's been years where you don't have that feature non-conference game on your home floor. You know, obviously you go back to that Arizona year, and that's why you schedule the home and home. So you pay it forward a little bit by going on the road and understand it's going to be tough to get. Not that, you know, last year wasn't a thing that you could have won and added to that quad 1A. But yeah, I mean, to have number one, which should be number one, come into your building, there just haven't been a lot of opportunities for that. We're going through it this week on the radio. I still think, you know, Indiana's the last time you've had that high-ranked team come to your building ultimately, an Ohio State squad during the Weber era when Jared Solinger was a freshman, and then it's Wake Forest. So you're talking about in like 20 years, only 3 times that's really happened for you. So that's a massive chance for the Illini to put a quad 1A on their resume, use the Orange Crush, who won't be gone yet. They'll be in finals week, and a team that has the makings of potential Final Four, and show that you've learned from kind of the slugfest team in Northwestern, and that's Tennessee will do that to the max. Although obviously if Lanier's making 6 bombs from the outside, they can do that to you too. So Wisconsin, I think it will put to the test the idea that, you know, is Kylan Boswell one of the best two-way players in the Big Ten? Is he one of the best, if not the best, on-ball defender guard? I think obviously Ace Baldwin wants to be in that conversation as well, and definitely is when Kylan gets Tanjay, I'm imagining. But yeah, Blackwell's been really good as well. So I think it's just being able to hold serve at home, and, you know, usually young players play. You can trust them more. Not saying that they've you know, let you down, obviously, but to get some of those moments on your home floor is going to be huge. And yeah, I mean, I think obviously the Tennessee is a quad one that's going to hold up. Wisconsin, will they end up being top 30 at the end of the year? I would probably say no as of now, but still it's a big game and important for the early stretch of the standings.
Isaac, before I let you go, one, does Yakashonis have any chance of pushing Dylan Harper for freshman of the year? I doubt it. 2, where do you kind of like, you've seen Illinois enough, you've seen the rest of the Big Ten. Are they in that top tier? Do you feel they're in that top tier too?
Yeah, no question that they're in the top tier. I think Harper is probably the number one player of the freshmen, but like this freshman of the year race is going to be nuts because Queen's been awesome, and like Janai Mobley has been awesome too. So that race has a lot of time left. I think there's going to be some ebbs and flows with it. But, you know, I think when you look up and down this Big Ten, I haven't been blown away by pretty much anybody. You know, and I think that's like where you're kind of at. I said from the beginning with this group, I thought Illinois was the most talented team. I think their 40 minutes, their best version of 40 minutes, is a higher ceiling than anybody in the Big Ten. But there's going to be nights like this, and that's just how it's going to be with a group like this. I think Illinois still is going to be in that top tier if they can continue to take care of business at home. For me, the most impressive teams I've seen so far in the Big Ten is Oregon, is UCLA, is Michigan, is Purdue, and it's Illinois. And so until that moment, like that's kind of like the top 5 teams that I have, and we'll kind of see if Indiana can play its way in it. And, you know, I think last night was another great example. Like you saw what Purdue going on the road to Penn State is. Like that team is also really good. Penn State is really, really good. They might be a team that I might have to carve out some room for in the top half of my standings, and I would not have told you that a couple weeks ago.
I think it's going to be a mess. The Big Ten is going to be a big mess, and it's going to be fun to watch. Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports, college basketball writer. Isaac, appreciate you hopping on with us tonight, man.
Of course, anytime.
All right, great stuff with Isaac. Derek, before I let you go, what do you think is the thing the staff, the players have to focus on? I mean, they get a little bit of another break here. They get a couple days to prep for Wisconsin, then another little break with Tennessee. I think it's one game in 12 days for this team. So after, which is probably the biggest disappointment of the season so far, what's the response?
Yeah, I think offensively, you've got to understand that the games you got coming up are going to be tough ones. I think Isaac did a really good job of presenting the argument for why KJ could once again, and he had turnovers in the first half. He's going to have really good defenders coming at him. So is that Kylan doing a little bit more on the ball? Is that just how do you ultimately account for the fact that they're going to get into him? They're going to be physical. And what is your offensive identity going to be if that's a struggle for him or just hard for him to create breakdowns as naturally as he's going to do in most matchups? So that's something I would definitely want to look at. I felt at times they didn't get Tommy the ball enough around the basket, even on rolls. I think he makes good decisions in the paint to kick out to three. If Rickhouse makes 4 threes instead of 1, which he's capable of, obviously, then it's obviously a different story, and he could definitely turn around and do that against Wisconsin. I think that defensively, just trying to, I think Isaac made a good point about taking away people's fastballs and ultimately, what they want to do. And I think matchups is something you got to think a lot about. I do like that Brad has shown it, here early, that guys that are, non-shooters or just kind of further down the scouting report, he's not been afraid to just flat out play a numbers game and say, this guy can take as many shots as he wants. And I don't think they're going to beat us ultimately. I know that Grant Nelson's 3 balls early in that Bama game didn't pay off ultimately, but can that look to be a little bit more? Can you take that and be a little bit more aggressive with it? With some, if you face if Tanjay's getting going, you need to trap him, or if Kylan's shutting that off and Blackwell's getting going. But I think Brad's going to hammer home the rebounding side of it. I think, they missed 42 shots tonight and they get 7 offensive rebounds. I think that's a stat. That's not nearly enough. And Trey's got to do that. I know he's probably going to bring Ben up again ultimately as rebounding. And maybe that means Merez. Maybe that means more Merez and figuring that out.
Another case. Ben Rickhouse, 1 offensive rebound in 39 minutes. He's 6'8", 6'9", right?
Yeah.
Those are, I think Ben, the shooting numbers are going to be there. I think he's a 38 to 40% 3-point shooter throughout the course of a season. I don't mind him shooting the shots, most of them that he did tonight, but he's got to be a better rebounder. And Brad is not, mixed words with that. In the Big Ten, you got to be a little tougher and you got to get to the glass because they don't have, a bunch of great rebounders. I mean, Avicic has been better than I expected. Kaspers has been awesome on the glass, but they need him to step up. You can't be 6'9" and have one of the worst rebound rates on the team.
No doubt. And Will Riley's very capable too. He's been a guy that at times has flashed. I think earlier in the season he was getting, first 3 or 4 games, getting about 3 or 4 offensive boards a night, and didn't have one tonight. So that's something that he can bring to the table as well. So, and I think that's important out of Ben. When Tommy's not having the ball in his hands, when he's not out on the perimeter on a pop, you want him to get some of those opportunities. Like you said, he's done a pretty good job on it. So it's really a group effort. It's challenge your team to play with that ferociousness and toughness all throughout. And Wisconsin is one challenge. Tennessee is that to the max, and we'll see if Illinois is up for that and don't just get slugged in the mouth repeatedly, because Tennessee can do that to you.
Kudos to Chris Collins. He's a really good coach. He's got tough culture up there. Nick Martinelli, Brooks Barnheiser. Man, those guys have been really good the last couple of years for them. And it's been tough for Brad Underwood against him, especially in Evanston. 3 straight losses after having 9 straight wins up there. It's a really tough loss to take, given you're up 10, given you're the more talented team. But we expect Illinois in this early going, especially to lose some of these games. It's how you respond to it. And boy, they better respond with 2 big opponents coming up next in Wisconsin and Tennessee. Derek Piper, thank you, man. Appreciate you for joining us late night here, man.
Definitely. Yeah. Ranked teams, I want to throw this out. Ranked teams now 0-5 in this building since the start of the 22-23 season. I think Boo Buie being a first-team All Big Ten guy 2 years in a row has a lot to do with that. Will that hold up through this year? we shall see. But as of right now, that's another on the tally, which is kind of crazy, especially for Illinois in particular, that has the fan advantage every time they walk in this building.
Yeah, you said it was like 70% Illini fans. It's starting to feel like the rack. One does not just simply go into at Walsh Ryan and get a victory anymore. So, all right, for Derek Piper, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody, thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit the notifications bell. Everyone have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.